Well, good evening, everybody. Went on a very long walk this afternoon, so totally chilled and calmed down. Although in Gala, it was completely frozen. Should have taken ice skates, but never mind. We survived. I think what particularly annoyed me about this heavy duty guilter, and guilters in general, is that they want to try and insult us as being able to not figure out anything for ourselves. And they come up with all sorts of stupid and bizarre explanations. I don't know if you saw some of the chat, some of the comments from the video earlier. I must admit, murder on the dance floor is a very frequent exchanger of conversations. He sends me a lot of stuff, and it occurred to me that the heavy-duty guilter was saying things like, I remember that Mike Holbach, he's only 25, and Tim didn't do the job because he's got this speech impediment. Well, that's never stopped anybody just because of a speech impediment. In fact, Jonathan Ross, for example, is one that made a huge career at having a speech impediment. And it can't be that bad because, as I say, Tim Holbach, he's a lawyer. So you have to be able to speak in public. You cannot possibly be a lawyer and avoid that, particularly as he is, I believe was like the chair of the local bar association, as in Lawyers Association. As I say, I got annoyed because they're trying to insult me and the rest of you by suggesting that they can come up with some sort of reason that we haven't looked at, that it's so painfully obvious, we must be stupid because we never got to that same conclusion. No. That's just, it's just bizarre. And then I started thinking, of course, about the fact that, yes, every possibility that heavy-duty guilter is another of Kratz's accounts, quite possibly. It doesn't really matter whether it is him or not. But thinking about Kratz, the one thing we do know is that he loves a press conference and he loves the attention of the media. And that was one of the things that he complained about, was that once the Stephen Avery case was done and dusted, that was him. He was kind of forgotten about, from that big high. He absolutely does love the attention of the press. So as JD pointed out, why have him share days doing press conferences? If Tim is unable to do it, why put 25-year-old Mike Holbach through having to be the family spokesperson? Do they need a family spokesperson? Why do you need a family spokesperson, Ken? You are the district attorney. You know it all. Part of your job, in fact, you prided yourself on being the chairman of the Wisconsin Crime Victims' Rights Board. Your job is to protect the victims, not to expose them to the media. It's just ridiculous. Of course, the obvious reason why Ken Kratz wanted a Holbach family member to take on this role of a family spokesperson is to side with him and the police and the prosecution, and so to garner even more hatred of Steve, so that it looks as if it's not just the state of Wisconsin that's against Steve, but it's also the Holbach family. It was his way, Kratz's way, of aligning the Holbach family behind him and the state, so that they're no longer neutral. They're not just the victims, but they're also part of the prosecution, the adversarial prosecution. And that's why they needed Michael Holbach to do what he did. But as I say, you'll never ever get a girl to explain why this grieving process. Well, first of all, why is he grieving? Why is he grieving? She's a missing person. You're her brother, and you're grieving. You're the last person to accept that anything bad has happened to Teresa. You're desperately keen to find her, but no. The grieving process. So he knows that he knows of her demise, but he's only going to grieve for a couple of days. There's no amount of, people say, oh, people slip the tongue. How many slips of the tongue are there in that? The grieving process and the fact it could last days. And all the other stuff that Mike does. As I say, this family spokesperson, if it was an onerous task, he didn't have to do it. He simply didn't have to do it. Anyway, we got so far down this article by Diana Alvear. And as I mentioned, the name is of her article is the same as Sharon Sunshine's. So this was where we started. Oh, yes. We'll save that for later. We'll save it for later. Her name was Teresa Holbach. What Netflix missed with Making a Murderer. What did they miss? So Diana says, I remember the early days of November 2005 vividly. How could I not? A young woman, just a few years younger than me, had disappeared. I, a young local TV reporter, was assigned to accompany one of the many groups of people that were putting up flyers with her face on it, asking for anyone who knew anything to come forward. Her name was Teresa Holbach. Well, in fact, Diana, her name is still Teresa Holbach. When she disappeared, she didn't change her name. Her name is Teresa Holbach. I had no idea, as did the greater Green Bay community, that her face would become the backdrop of one of the most haunting murder cases we'd ever encountered. I start with Teresa for a reason, because lately no one else seems to. You may have heard of a recent Netflix series, Making a Murderer. It's gone viral, as everyone loves to say. It's riveting, it's full of twists, it's making people angry, sad, frustrated. Some are even trying to petition Obama to get involved and pardon the parties involved. Well, no, they were actually, yes, they wanted pardons involved, but they also wanted, I remember just as many people saying, why is the FBI not investigating this when there is such blatant abuses of the legal machinations. Aside from the fact that that's not exactly how the system works, the most troubling aspect of this entire story, at least for me, is that a young woman's death has been treated as a mere plot device. Let me tell you a little bit about Teresa. She grew up in a small farming community in Calumet County, Wisconsin, one of 5 siblings in a close-knit family. She was 25 years old, aspiring photographer. She loved karaoke. She coached her younger sister's volleyball team. By all accounts, she was one of the nicest, most caring persons most had ever met. So when days went by without her family hearing from her, they were immediately alarmed. The rest of the family were alarmed. Mike Holbach started grieving. They had no idea that the next several weeks of their lives would be a nightmare from which they'd never wake up. I write this piece as one of the many journalists who covered her disappearance and eventually the trial of the 2 men convicted of murdering her. You forgot to add, though, Diana, in 2 separate trials with 2 different murder scenes. I interviewed Stephen Avery shortly after he was named as one of the last people to have seen Teresa alive. We stood in the darkness next to the red van that she'd been hired to photograph at Auto Trader magazine. He calmly answered my questions, even the one about whether he'd been, I think, asked to take a polygraph test. It was a pretty uneventful interview. It was only after documents were filed in the case that I learnt I'd been standing on her remains as we conducted our interview. No, you were nowhere near. You're outside Barb's van, not Stephen's, unless you were somewhere over in the quarry pits. That thought will never leave me. I interviewed several of the Avery family members, including his older brother Chuck, his mum, and some of his female cousins. This was before they stopped talking to the media. Because Dean and Jerry, they acted as the family's spokesperson. They did all the interviews on behalf of the family. And we see, don't we, very reluctant for Dolores, Chuck, to actually say anything to the cameras. However, the most important interviews for me were those with the Halbach family. They let me into their home after she'd officially been declared a missing person. I wonder if it was her, Diana Alvear, that actually asked that question of Mike. You know, how are you holding up? I could feel their sadness, the fear they felt, the dwindling hope that maybe she'd be found alive and well. The dwindling hope? As I say, they are the last people to accept that anything bad has happened to them. Still, they answered all of my questions. They told me about their beloved Teresa, about her passion for photography, her caring nature, her fun-loving side. Her brother, Mike, took on the incredibly difficult burden of being the family spokesperson. Why? Why do you have to have a spokesperson? After every major court day, he'd dutifully take his turn in front of all the cameras and the microphones and patiently answer questions about the latest in the case. I asked him how he found the strength to do this day after day after day. He replied, to give Teresa the justice she deserves. That's exactly what I am trying to do with this essay. I too was outraged by what I saw in that Netflix series. Teresa deserved more than the mere minutes they gave her on screen. I'm not here to weigh in on whether I think Stephen or Brendan are guilty. My colleagues did a great job covering the legal aspects of the case. There are plenty of credible news outlets that are presenting evidence against Steve that somehow, for reasons neither I nor my colleagues can understand, were left on the cutting room floor when this series was edited. I mean, let's just hope that Diana has the guts and the nerve to do another essay about it, having watched series 2. I suspect not. Steve and Brendan may be serving life sentences behind bars, but they're alive. Teresa was handed a death sentence 10 years ago. She will never fall in love, get engaged, get married. She'll never have a family of her own. She'll never get to pursue that passion for photography. Her dreams and her future died with her. All her family have left are memories and the deep love they shared. There is a victim in this case. Her name is, as I say, her name was Teresa. Her name is still Teresa Halbach. And she deserves better than this? Yeah, she does deserve a lot better than the investigation and the reporting that was given. So anyway, there are, as you can see, 83 responses. And I've read through most of them. And you know what? The best one was the first one, by Tyler Prince. Let me just check, make sure everything is working as it should. Let's just have a look. My Facebook page is exploding. Yeah. Tyler Prince, 7th of January 2016. I'm not sure where to begin with my response about why this article is terrible. Perhaps with you saying, my colleagues did a great job covering the legal aspects of the case, and there are plenty of credible news outlets that are presenting evidence against Stephen Avery. What? Your evidence of the media doing its job is the corrupt prosecutor? Partly responsible for this whole mess? He's a dirty old man. My proof? I think we all know plenty about Ken Kratz. We know what he's like. Next, the Holbach family was invited to sit down for the making of the movie. We invited the Holbach family to participate in the film, and we had coffee with Mike, the official spokesperson for the family, to discuss the idea, but they decided not to participate. So he's quite happy to face the whole of the world media when it suits them. So we filmed Mike at all the press conferences that we held, but that was the extent of our interaction with him. This guy is creepy. You're holding him as if he's some pillar, but for the life of me, I can't see why. This series about a failing of our legal system. I'm not saying that Teresa is insignificant, but she doesn't have much to do with what the story and the facts are about. I get why you're sensitive, because this series makes the media look very bad. But have some tact. The media is partly responsible for what happened to Steve. Instead of trying to shift blame to the filmmakers, perhaps you could take some responsibility and not keep perpetuating dangerous ideas. I thought you might have learned something from this incident. Apparently not. I'm not going to keep going, but my final comment is this article is poorly written on top of having questionable content. And I thought that was absolutely spot on. Here's another article. Theories mention Mike. Some people just aren't themselves when there is a camera in front of them and can appear uncomfortable or even a little strange. Again, if Mike was uncomfortable about it, why didn't Ken Kratz take all the press conferences? He loves doing press conferences. Why inflict that, if that's the right word, on a family member who is grieving? His grieving is so much that he started grieving even when Teresa was only a missing person. Case in point, Mike Holbach, brother of making a murderer victim Teresa. Many viewers have claimed that in the news footage collected in the Netflix docuseries, Mike comes across as suspicious. His behavior led many to post theories on Reddit and various websites such as MTV and Maxim, which speculate that Mike could have been involved in Teresa's disappearance and murder in 2005. However, even Stephen Avery doesn't seem to believe Mike could have been involved. In a 2009 court filing, Avery suggested that members of his own family could be responsible. In that filing, Mike's name never even came up. I don't know, do any of you think that Mike Holbach was actually involved in the murder of Teresa? Ultimately, Stephen, Avery and Brendan were the ones convicted of Teresa's murder, and Mike was never considered a suspect. He did not respond to Bussel's request for comment on the matter. Avery's lawyer, Jerome Butin, stated during the trial, as seen in the docuseries, in most cases, the people who are close to a victim are the ones who are in fact the killers. And in this case, in every single instance, all those people who are close to her, the police never investigated any of them. They never, from the minute the case was seriously considered the possibility that Teresa was killed by somebody she knew. There's of course no way to know for certain how much the police looked into Teresa's family and friends. Special Agent Fassbender claimed in the docuseries that Avery wasn't the only suspect investigated. We go into an investigation and you're not going to lock and load. You're going to listen to all the intelligence and information being brought in. Look at all the evidence. The object is to allow the evidence and the facts that are uncovered as you go along to lead you to the most logical suspect, he said. In this case, the most logical suspects to the prosecution were Stephen Brendan. It's highly unlikely Mike was involved in any wrongdoing. Well, depends. If knowing that her sister is dead when she's still only a missing person, that is the kind of question that needs to be asked and answered. How do you know when she's only a missing person? How did Maxine Carr give the game away? By doing an interview almost exactly the same as Mike. However, as the internet is focusing on and picking apart each piece of footage of Mike provided by the documentaries, people are starting to ask questions. Well, maybe we'll get some questions here. Sophie, and how is Mike Holbach not a suspect? Him and his creepy interviews, worst brother ever. It's definitely worth noting that Mike only appears in the series during press conferences and not in any one-on-one interviews with the filmmakers. Well, yeah, but they've got footage of that, him being asked that question. How are you holding up? Said Laura in an interview with Vulture. We invited the Holbach family to participate in the film, and we had coffee with Mike, the official spokesperson for the family, to discuss the idea, but they decided not to participate. So we filmed him at all the press conferences, but that was the extent of our interaction with him. I think this looks like the scene where Emily actually asks him, you've just told us, to watch this video. Have you watched it, Mike? So viewers aren't getting Mike's full side of the story or a chance to see him in a role other than that of the official Holbach family spokesperson. Once again, why do you need an official Holbach family spokesperson? Is not the chairman of the Crime Victims' Rights Board, is he not qualified to be that spokesperson? Why do you need to put a family member through all this? For one simple reason, to garner even more dislike and hatred for Stephen Avery, because you align the Holbach family behind the prosecution. It's also worth considering that in 2005, he was a young man who had just lost his sister in a violent and horribly public way and was thrust into a national spotlight. That situation could make anyone come across as uncomfortable on camera. But you didn't have to do it, Mike. You did not have to do it, or did you? Was that part of the deal you had to strike? Was that one of the instructions of Ken Kratz? I say it beggars belief, doesn't it? That Ken Kratz, who loves doing press conferences, loves being in front of the microphone. They often, the authors often say that about Steve, that Steve loved being in front of the microphones. No, he didn't. Because if he's in front of the microphones, he's being questioned. People are questioning his innocence. Anyway. I'm not endorsing the accusations in these Reddit theories. I am simply reporting on them to acknowledge their existence as one facet of how viewers have reacted to making a murderer. I believe it's crucial to keep in mind that these are real people whose lives are affected by a tragic loss. The internet would likely do well to remember that before leaping to conclusions with unsubstantiated allegations. Yeah, we within the truth community, we're simply asking a question. We're simply asking the question, was the question ever asked of Mike by investigators, journalists, and by investigators, what the hell do you mean by what you've just said? Mike Holbach, if you watch the confession, there's our case. Reporter, have you seen the tape? No. Yeah, there's Emily with a look of disgust, as if, what a plonker. What on earth are you doing? You know, why are you acting as the family spokesperson when you come out with something as crass and as stupid as that, unless you've been put up to it? When his sister went missing in 2005, Mike was placed in one of the most difficult positions someone can find themselves in. Whenever he came on screen, I couldn't help but think of Gone Girl, specifically whenever the character Nick, whose wife goes missing, has to make appearances in front of the media. Nick had each of his mannerisms and accidental smiles analysed when he'd really, spoiler, done nothing wrong. Reddit user, docuseries fan, also came to Mike's defence. I have no idea about Gone Girl. Being the family spokesperson is a lot of pressure for a guy in his early 20s. He didn't have to do it. He did not have to do that. Why did he do it? He knows someone needs to be the voice for the family? No. You've got a special prosecutor, Ken Kratz, who knows the case far, far better than the family ever will. And that's the point of having him as the chairman of the Wisconsin Crime Victims' Rights Board, is that he can answer all questions and protect the family from the media. But I can't imagine how hard that is when you are dealing with the stress agony of your sister going missing and eventually being murdered and having to speak in public at the same time. Having to speak? No, he didn't have to speak. That would be incredibly stressful, to say the least. You're probably not sleeping much and spending hours around your family trying to comfort them as well as yourself. That's why I don't put much stock into any statements that seemed off to us in the context of this documentary. To me, suspecting Mike Holbach of something is just as outrageous as all the holes in the police investigation of Steve and Brendan. None of it makes sense, and I think it's quite unfair. Just to be clear, I understand why people speculate. I just don't think it's fair to accuse someone when there's no proof. Once again, for the umpteenth time, Holly Wells, Jessica Chapman went missing. Maxine Carr referred to them in the past tense. Investigative journalists pick up on that, alert the police, case solved. Where did that occur here? Why were the press quite happy to give Mike this easy ride? Because he was aligned with Kratz and the prosecution, and it just garnered even more hatred for Steve. And that's really all the press are interested in. It's just parroting whatever Kratz said. In a Reddit theory roundup from the New York Post, they wrote about one such theory. Viewers have noted odd behaviour from Bullock's camera-happy brother, including his body language when doing an interview alongside her ex-boyfriend, as well as this excerpt from an interview he did with the documentarians one day after his sister had been reported missing. At last, we're going to get some explanation for this. They've got excellent. We're going to get a positive answer as to what the F he was doing. How are you holding up, Mike? I mean, the grieving process, could last days, could last weeks, could last years. Hopefully we find answers as soon as possible so we can, begin to hopefully, move on, hopefully, with Teresa still in our life. So what did the press ask him? As mentioned previously, Mike was never considered a suspect by the prosecution or the defense. Have I missed something? I thought we were going to get some explanation of that. Were we hell? In Avery's 209 post-trial motion, he made no mention of Mike's name. It's also important to keep in mind that grief can take many forms, and it could be deemed insensitive to judge one person's expression of sadness. What an absolute load of baloney and tosh. I thought we were going to get some answers as to what the hell he was saying. No. Why does Mike smirk his way throughout this show? In an article about the show, Gorka pointed to the existence of Reddit theories about Mike. In terms of fostering compassion for the dead, Holbach family spokesperson Mike doesn't help things at all by being creepily grinning when discussing his sister's murder trial and by blindly investing faith in the police. We love the police, he gushes at one point. Did he need closure so much that he refused to see the defense's reasonable suggestion that his sister's actual murderer might still be somewhere on the loose, or did he need to show solidarity with the police for some other reason? That's a good question, but you're not going to get that from the journalists in Wisconsin. You're just not going to get that question. There's no Jeremy Thompsons in Wisconsin. Well, there was John Farrak. Whatever your feelings about Mike, it's important to remember that the docuseries covers an actual crime with an actual victim. Seriously? We're that stupid that we don't know that, and that real people's lives are forever altered by her murder, not just Steve and Brendan's, but the entirety of the Holbach family and their friends. Making a Murderer wouldn't be such compelling television if it wasn't so full of contradictions, drama, and chances to theorize about possible conclusions. But it's essential to also be aware of the root story before making what are, as of now, entirely unsubstantiated claims. Well, we know that has changed completely on its head. But yet still, you will not find anybody questioning what the hell was Mike saying. I think we've looked at this one. Yeah, we went through all that. I will just leave this bit up here though, because I want to refer to it. And I want to use this bit here, I want to use this quote here. Here is this Diana Alvia. She asked Steve, and knowing her, not that he knew her very well, to Steve, are you? What are your feelings for her parents? And Steve replies, they must be going through hell. They're going through hell. Let's get the right one up. They must be on a sex lie. They must be going through hell. I mean, the grieving process, you know, could last days for them, could last weeks, could last years. You know, hopefully we find answers as soon as possible so we can, you know, begin to hopefully, you know, move on, hopefully with Teresa still in our life. Had Stephen Avery said what Mike Holbach had said, you can bet your life that the whole of Wisconsin would have jumped on Steve's back and said, grieving process. She's only a missing person. If Steve had said that, they would have jumped all over him. So I think we've been through this. Yeah, I think this was the article where it talks about Emily Matasic. Yeah, here we go. What's this? Emily Matasic talked with Teresa Holbach's friends today as they focus on the life she had, not the men who took her away. I don't think there's much doubt as to where Emily Matasic is aligning herself. Unless Emily got together with Teresa's friends and they discussed Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. But I don't think that's what she's referring to for one moment. Yeah, there we go. I can't believe it's been 10 years, she says. This is probably the biggest story that I've covered in 15 plus years since graduating and working as a reporter. And what did she tell me? Let's have a look, see what she told me. It's here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. This is what she said to me. Paul, thank you for reaching out. I know you're looking for an in-depth response. Well, no, just a simple answer to my question, my initial question, which was a very simple question, Emily. What was the follow-up? In what way did the press, the journalists in Wisconsin, respond to Mike Holbach's use of the term, the grieving process, and the fact that it could last days? You know, you proved yourself, Emily, when in that question to Mike. Have you watched this tape? You were pissed off with him. To all of my questions, there was one main question. But what you're asking for happened nearly 15 years ago. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what someone said or what questions were asked more than a decade ago. I've covered thousands of more important stories since then, and there is no way for me to remember every single specific detail from all of those stories. Nonsense. Total nonsense. Anyway, save the best till last. I mentioned that Jerry sent a Happy New Year's message. I'll show it you here. This is the message that he sent. Happy New Year, Paul. I must admit, I do like doing the a little bit of French, a bit like a little bit like Dale Boy. I don't know much French, but what bit I do, I use as often as I can. Thanks, buddy. Me too, and you. And so yesterday I carried on by saying, and may I accept? Let me just make that a bit bigger for you. And may I accept your kind words on behalf of both myself and all the supporters of truth and justice for Teresa, Steve and Brendan within my circle of friends. And you're all my friends. And his reply was, you guys all rock. And there's only one thing I can say to that, Jerry. Yep, we rock nearly as much as you and Dean. Okay, I'm going to leave it there and go and watch the Packers tonight, and hopefully they'll cheer us up, because if they beat Chicago, and remember, it's go Packers and beat the Bears. Now let's just take a couple of minutes to look through for who's all here. There's 30 of you here. Came to listen to me ranting and raving. Yeah. So Sean, Dark Side, Julie, Audra, sorry, Dark Side, Audra. Am I missing some at the top there? I think I'm missing some at the top there. Yeah, absolutely. I watched a documentary about a mum still believing her daughter alive after 20 years. I mean, in the Madeleine McCann case, there was still people desperately trying to find her. They, family members, they never ever give up. Hi, Alice. Julie. And Sean, thank you, Sean. Yes, you were quick on the draw there with that guilt messages, because I don't know, T1 seems to turn away for 2 seconds to go and make himself a cup of tea, and he misses all the action. I don't know, T1. West Virginia, good day to you all, and to you indeed. Dark Side, Anthony. Hi, Anthony. Who else have we got here? Julie, Alice. Oh, Paul Ward. Hi, Paul. Did I ever mention you've got a great first name there? Absolutely superb first name. Julie, Alice, Audra again. Sean, Julie, Double D. Question. Ken Kratz claimed that an arson investigation found the bones. This is the first I heard of this. Anyone hear this? Right. I think that John Ertl is something to do with he might have some sort of arson knowledge. Certainly not to the extent of Kathleen Zellner's. What have we got here? Eamon Rame. Yeah. I think we all know about mainstream media and their fakeness. Yep, we certainly do. As I say, it's for me, what really annoys me is the lack of investigative journalism. Any of these journalists actually, coming out and saying, what do you mean by that, Ken? What, Mike? What, Ken? What do you mean by that? Mike, what do you mean by this grieving process? No sense of trying to ask that kind of question. Whereas, of course, you've got Emily Matasic on the phone to Steve in January, basically trying to tell him, you've got no chance. You might just as well, accept it and give me your confession. You almost get the sense in that phone call that she's expecting Steve to just once Emily, this expert at getting confessions, has presented all the evidence to Steve verbally, that he's going to say, well, actually, yeah, I probably am guilty. Yeah, okay, just lock us up and throw away the key. Nah. Yes, exactly. They wanted all the airtime. But why would Sweaty give up half of his interviews, half of the chance for him to be on television, and narcissists such as Ken Kratz give up valuable airtime? D. Audra, Julie, Darkside, Julie, Sean, Julie. Yep, absolutely. Amen. Yeah, when you think how bizarre it is that Ryan Hillegas has got this day planner, yet the police on a toll road. Yeah, I think you can say that there's certainly a lot of people that are involved. It just depends on what their level of involvement is, you know. And I think it is important, yes, that when it comes to pointing the finger as to who is responsible for the disappearance of Teresa, I think we can talk about a lot of people. For me, number one suspect on my list has always been and will probably always be Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. I think it was somewhat clever of Ken Kratz to say in open court that, you know, you have to believe that your sheriff's department murdered Teresa. I've no doubt about that. I think it's pretty clear cut. I think, you know, the timing of Teresa's disappearance was just too much. It's too much of a coincidence that it's so favourable for Kasurik and Vogel. And let's see, you know, we've got the Sheriff's Department, Kenneth Peterson, that talks openly about it would have been easier to kill Stephen. So that's something they routinely talk about, is killing people. Why? To make life easy for them. The only problem with that, of course, is that you kill Steve and the civil suit still carries on posthumously, but you've got the added huge problem of trying to explain, well, what happened to Steve? How come Steve's no longer around anymore? No, that wouldn't have solved the problem at all for Ken Peterson. That would just make it worse. Yes, Dodie, you've sent this a couple of times, and you're absolutely right. You know, Kratz wanted to have press conferences every other day with Mike providing the press conference in between. Why would a narcissist like Ken want to do that? Oh yeah, absolutely. And yes, absolutely, Therese. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't know. I don't think Mike was involved. It could have been. Obviously, it would be really helpful if we could get the evidence one way or the other as to whether the bones are Teresa's or not. I think that would be very helpful. Yes, Audra. It's disturbing. It's a pattern. It's not just coincidence. There are so many of them, so many, and this is why I'm really looking forward to speaking with Mark Godsey, who was almost a Kratz type prosecutor, highly motivated, always believed that he was prosecuting guilty people, not afraid to bend the rules because the rules are already bent in favor of the prosecutors. And yeah, really wanting to garner this kind of hatred towards the defendant and completely destroy any kind of presumption of innocence. It is disturbing that so many cases are manipulated by state prosecutions to convict in the press. And as I've discovered in Richard Leo's book, you know, this sort of adversary system between defense and prosecution attorneys, it starts way back with investigators who immediately, in their interrogations, they're not seeking the truth. They're just seeking to put as much pressure on whoever they've decided to interview to get them to give some form of confession. Perhaps Halbach dealings with the media demonstrates this so flagrantly. Absolutely. My goodness, we have got a lot here. Yeah, POG. As I've said before about this one, this, you know, as somebody that's a member of the church here in Galashiels, used to actually play for Sunday services. This idea that God is on the side of planters of evidence, that God directed her to the car, as if God has got nothing more important with his time on a Saturday morning in Wisconsin than to point Pam to where this RAV4 has been planted. Yeah, I've seen some stuff by N46 Controller. Is that on Reddit? No, I've seen it. Yeah, all of Mike's interviews are odd. The state claims somewhere that the tarp was in storage. The whole bunch is odd. The tarp was burned. In the burn pit, only metal grommets left, but no bullets. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sean, yes. We love the police. We love the police. No matter how much I would love to see justice, I feel that every main player in this case will go untouched. I don't know. I thought it was interesting in that Devontae Sanford case how the guy Phillips, was it Michael Phillips and James Tolbert, they were being thrown under the bus by Kim Worthy On this occasion, the buses aiming straight for the Assistant Attorney General Tom Fallon and Special Prosecutor Norm Garn, and now an elected sheriff of Calumet County, for surreptitiously deciding to get rid of biological evidence, which Judge Willis had said should be preserved, and which actually leading up as part of the Avery Commission, Norm Garn had started to draft up the sort of guidelines as to what should be considered as stuff that should be preserved, and any kind of biological evidence, should have been preserved. And not just the fact that they get rid of these bones, but the runaround that they decided that they were going to play with Kathleen Zellner. And I do remember this quote, from way back in 2016, when this lawyer said, don't mess Kathleen Zellner about. Don't mess her about. You will come off worse. I personally think that, that when the main players in this case are having their collar felt, I think we'll hear a lot more about some of the other players. Yep. I mean, the thing is, Darkside, they've shot themselves in the foot so much so far. They they could make matters even worse for themselves, than if they were to hand over the evidence, let Kathleen test it, and let's have some closure on this. It makes you wonder what it is they're trying to hide. Was this was Teresa assassinated to end this civil suit? Who gave that order? Who suggested it? Where did the idea come from? How now are the the people in Wisconsin, Manitowoc and Calumet in particular, are going to have a real shock when they discover that the people that they elect, they pay to protect them, are actually capable of sacrificing a 25-year-old female photographer just to save people's pensions and reputations, because it's Steve and Avery that's taken them down. Could it be that that's the case? I liked Emily most of the time in Making a Murder. It was only since then that there's been a couple of things that she's posted and said that make me feel that she is on the guilty side. And as I say, the way they were smiling at Kratz. Just finish up then. I'll show you these pictures that we went through yesterday, just in case you weren't here earlier. So earlier today. If you remember, this is Jeremy Thompson. He's the guy that had the interview with Maxine Carr that solved the Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman murder. How did that come about? Because when she spoke to the TV reporter, Jeremy Thompson, Maxine said, "No one believes they would ever run away. They were very close to the families. This is something that I will keep for the rest of my life. It's what Holly gave me on the last day of term." And there's a poem written inside saying to a special teaching assistant, and that we will miss her and we will see her in the future. That was the kind of girl she was. She was just lovely, really. Instantly, Carr's mistake was spotted. She had referred to Holly in the past tense with the words were and was. That immediately gave me. All right, we've been through that one. That's messy. I'm just making sure we've not. Oh, yes. Of course, what's. Sorry, let me put that. I think I've got the same one twice. Yes, I have. Okay. I didn't actually read this properly, did I? So, what he actually said. As I say, if Stephen Avery had said what Mike Holbach had said, then that would have been classed immediately as a confession. But in fact, what Steve said when asked about it, this was the day after that she was reported missing. They must be going through hell. You know, I figure my ma and my dad and everyone else, my family, they went through hell when I went to, did 18 years for something I didn't do. You know, talking about just being away. I figure they're going through probably the same thing because they lost somebody or whatever. You know, she's got to be out there somewhere. So somebody should be looking. Yeah. I mean, the grieving process, you know, could last days, could last weeks. Yeah, this was again, just in case you didn't catch us earlier. This is the message to and from John Farrak, and this was a while back. This was before the Wrecking Crew even came out, and this was before I set up the John Farrak to appear on the first segment with the dude on the original Mammothon. I couldn't believe how poor some of the journalists come to the case are. Exactly. I once heard that one of the reporters in Appleton who covered the trial used to golf regularly with Kratz. And what is that tweet that I just missed then? John Farrak. A genuine bond is here. It shows. Just look at all their faces. Am I right? We've got there Colleen Henry, Kircher. Is that Tom Kircher? And Emily. And the sweaty prize. I know this is one of Dr. Siltman's many favourites. If you have a bullet that's fired from Stephen Avery's gun, and that bullet we know sometime before the 5th of November passed through the body of the victim, and you know the body includes the head, of course, you know, but for a lot of people the body would not mean the head, would it? It would mean elsewhere. So it's strange that he's changing it to the body of the victim, because at trial the state presented absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any bullet wounds on any of the bones that they collected. Passed through the body of the victim, Therese Holbach. There was an excellent chance that we knew exactly not only who killed her, but how she was killed. However, not much focus was put on the bullet in the series. Are you kidding us? Are you kidding us? That's exactly what Zelna did. She got hold of that bullet, and guess what she found in it? She discovered that unfortunately there's something in the water in Hilbert that causes bones of the residents there to turn into wood. That's a terrible shame. That's that one. I just want to make sure I've not missed any of them. Oh yeah, this was Emily Matatic. You know, this is probably the biggest story that I've covered. It's so big that, you know, I've covered thousands of stories. You know, I I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, you know, and I can't give you any answers to any of your questions because what you're asking for happened nearly 15 years ago. I can't remember what I had yesterday for breakfast. So, you know, I've covered thousands of stories since then that are obviously far more important. Is that so? This is probably the biggest story that I've ever covered in 15 years. Okay. A little bit of disingenuosity there, I believe. Oh, yes. So now we've got, hi there, Crockett. Nice to see you here. And Sean, Double D Crockett. Yeah, Crockett's getting stuck into the chat there. Double D Sean. Just around Joyce. Oh dear. William and Liquid Sunshine here. This, I'm glad you reminded me, Sharon. This jumper is because, of course, tonight, in just under an hour's time, I'll go upstairs, and although it's not live, I will watch the red zone, as it's called, and see how the Packers fare against the Bears, because they are top of their division, which I believe is the NFC. And if they beat the Bears, then the Bears don't qualify for the playoffs. It's what I understand, and they will. The Bears will end up. Sorry, the Packers will end up as divisional champions. Hi, William, and so just had a few more comments came up. Yes. This Procrats in there. Now I think I found out that Woody is actually somebody with a very much a German sounding name, such as Messerschmitt or something like that, and it's a she. As I think you kind of expect that. I think within our community, the girls outnumber the boys by about 85% to 15%. That's a sort of rough guess, and one can imagine that it's the same within the Gilter community. My main beef with Woody Woodpecker is the fact that it was as if she was saying that, oh yeah, Charles Darwin is Ken. Charles Darwin is Ken. That they are the same. We had some one or two quite good exchanges of conversation. But yeah, Charles is Ken. As I discovered when Ken would appear for a while on commenting, and then he would disappear, and Charles Darwin would then appear, and then he'd disappear, and he'd be back to Ken again. Okay. Yeah. Playlist might be Ken. Yep. I think. Oh, hey, T1's here. Excellent. Yeah. I'm afraid everybody else has got to enjoy their span of T1 apart from you. I think we have to get a guilt on just for you to deal with them. Okay. And Disco Pervert is here. Let's see what Disco Pervert is saying. Charles Darwin, yes, I think so. He was defending Judy Dvorak on a thread once, yes. And yes, he is. It's so transparent. What's funny was that Cindy Knight, a while back, no, he's not, is he? Somebody was asking me about Cindy Knight, asking if that's Ken Pratt. So, well, no, Cindy is actually one of these strange sort of half guilters, as I suppose you would call them. Ones that apparently wholeheartedly defend Brendan, but think that Steve is guilty. The only thing I would say about that is that it could be that for some people they are misguided by the fact that if the evidence that Zellner is uncovering means that we're getting closer and closer to it being the next door neighbour, Scott or Bobby, that's involved. Yeah, you can understand why this brings it right to Steve's doorstep. That's the only reason I could think of people going down that route. But anyway, I think I think that's a good idea. Yes, whiskey, jumper. Yes, yeah. And was this a spanner party I missed? Absolutely, T1. I think we're gonna have to get one. No, I haven't had any. I did have some whiskey on the walk. It is so cold out. It was about -7 today. So yes, but I didn't have my jumper on then. But I did have a little hip flask of whiskey. Yeah, it's. I'll show you it. It's got a big G on it for Green Bay Packers. And it's bright, isn't it? It's bright. It's very, very bright. Okay, I think that's it for today. And I'm going to say cheerio. Thank you all for tuning in. And just one last time, definitely give your huge round of applause. Happy New Year from Jerry. Happy to accept on behalf of all of us. And you guys all rock. And you guys do all rock. And we rock nearly as much as Dean and Jerry. I'll say cheerio. And we'll catch you all again soon.